Hello wise people, you are listening to the Wise Words Book Club, where we review some of our favourite non-fiction books and we provide you with their key ideas. Not only that, but we teach you how to apply them to the real world and how to benefit from them. If you like what you hear, make sure you click that sexy little follow button and head on over to our website wisewords.blog or our Instagram wisewordsblog, where we upload daily content on all your favourite books. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Life.
All right, 12 rules for life. There, it's probably looking a bit backwards actually, but
Does cameras flip?
they do if it's like this one.
Ah, that makes sense.
So an antidote to chaos.
Should we just start with the first rule? I think.
I guess so. Yeah.
Big, so
I think that's pretty
get it up. Remind me.
So the first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back.
So,
all right.
I mean, to be honest, it's quite interesting in the sense that he mainly uses lobsters to talk about why we should have our shoulders back. So he delves deep into sort of dominance hierarchies within animals, mainly using lobsters.
Because they're 300 million years old.
Yes, basically his argument is the stuff which has lasted the test of time. So like the animals which are from way back were like their core is the same core that we still have almost. Yeah. Like the evolution hasn't changed our sort of the way animals sort of the dominance hierarchy is in animals. It hasn't changed for millions and millions of years. And I think another thing is their brains operate on the same neurotransmitter, serotonin. It is serotonin, right? Yeah. And he found that the most dominant males had the highest amount of serotonin, and there was like a feedback. So whenever a dominant male defeated a lesser male in battle, or like, and to be honest, they weren't even having battles half the time, was it? His way of describing was they sort of like postured for a little bit, and then if somebody did challenge them, they'd have a fight.
I think he was trying to get across the point that, you know, if you come across, there's two of you both want resources, and there's not enough for both of you. So then, you know, there's like this point at which you have to weigh up how much cost to yourself you are willing to incur to get these resources. Yeah. You know, and so like at first you may like do a little dance, they have their little fucking clippers. And they walk around, and it's all just like, it's exactly what you see in the street when you just see bravado and like confidence, like what the fuck are you doing? You know, it's like it's all just show.
It's like sizing people up almost in a way, isn't it? It's
exactly.
It's an interesting idea, like the idea that you could like fake confidence in a conflict situation, and the person who seems the most confident could make the other person back down, in the sense that if you just behave in a way, or you acted in a way that you were like super confident that you were going to beat this guy up, or whatever way, like beat them in a battle or something, then they'll be sensing whether or not you mean what you're saying, and if you don't, then they'll attack you.
It's interesting because like I think a lot of it is due to like the proximity. The closer you get, the more likely, like it's all just testing, you know, like they go back and forwards, and when you get closer and closer, and then you have a fight, or then you hit one and then you have a fight. And it's like he describes the kind of 4 stages of it. It's like at first you'd see the other one, and then there's like this kind of dance or ritual, or kind of you know, to show off.
You could argue with like in humans it could be this idea of like little mini snide comments, or like ways of riling each other up and figuring out like when they start threatening, or if somebody threatens another person, like the clues that person's serious in the threat. Because some people could say like, I'm going to beat you up, and I mean I just said it then, that doesn't sound very bloody convincing, does it?
But the thing is that like you would never start with just like randomly hitting someone, would you?
Of course, yeah.
It's like that's the thing. It's like there's lots of
you
steps
size people
previous
up first, right?
to it. Exactly.
Size up what they can do to you, etc.
I was going to add to like the whole brain thing in terms of like he talks about how basically our like oldest area of our brain, pretty much like the stem, pretty much is like responsible for containing these kind of hierarchies. You know, that so basically if one lobster fights with another lobster and it loses, it goes down in the pecking order. It goes down in the hierarchy.
Yeah, we all have these like implicit, unspoken hierarchies of like achievement or whatever that we all. I like to think we all pretend they don't exist almost. I feel like we always pretend they don't exist to a degree, or like, but deep down we know they exist.
I think it's not something that like you think about all the time.
Yeah, you think about, oh fuck, where am I in the pecking order? Like you have like a leaderboard like in a video game. It's more like, but you know what I mean? It's more like, another way I think it could be like, okay, he's really good at sport, therefore he's higher than me at the dominance hierarchy of sport, or something
Yeah,
similar to
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Or they're better looking than me, or they are smarter than me, or they are more creative than me, and that's kind of the way I would say that most people tend to think about it. It wouldn't be like it wouldn't be like, to be honest, you could even say it depending on like the environment you're in. It could be like, he's more aggressive than me, or he's more threatening than me, he's bigger than me, he could dominate me, that type of thing. But it also depends on what the environment's like valuing at the time. So for example, maybe if you're in a really violent sort of culture, don't know where it exists, it probably does exist, it has existed in the past, and somebody who's bigger and stronger than you would be intimidated. So in that dominance hierarchy, you'd be lower down. Like you could say with capitalism, the dominance hierarchy is flipped to like people who try and have more money, basically. Well, that's one thing that's
this is it, money and power, rather than like, because you don't really walk around hitting people as much. You're not really like some.
And I think what's more interesting as well, what he was saying is like, whenever you have a hierarchy, you have a hierarchy based on a specific value, and that's basically what we're saying then, like the hierarchy of value of strength, the hierarchy of value of the size of the person. So he talked about how in elephant seals, they are specifically based on like power and size. So the dominance hierarchy is based on the bigger the elephant seal in the males, that is, gets all the females, and he keeps them in a harem. And then it's interesting just to think like, he talked about humans, about how one of the things that separates us from other animals is we have such a diverse range of dominance hierarchies, being like, so like I just said, the intelligence, you could do the creativity, you could do kindness, you could do, you can do aggression, you can do power as well, depending on different areas. Why do we have all these different sports? Why do we have all these different artistic creations? There are many ways and many different games to win. And I think one of his main points was like this whole idea of putting your shoulders back. That releases serotonin in your body, which helps you have the confidence to climb a dominance hierarchy. So the more serotonin you have going, the more dominant you feel, the more confident you're going to feel in what you're doing. And I think, I mean, I don't know if you talked about in this chapter, but this idea of like finding what you are good at, because we talked about this earlier, you know? If you're 6'8", you're going to be better at basketball, hypothetically. I mean, you still might be absolutely shit, but hypothetically, in somebody's 5'2", because you have the height advantage. Therefore, people like that are more likely to be good at that. Therefore, you should play to your own strengths within dominance hierarchies, or you should choose your dominance hierarchy based on what value you,
find your like strengths, and then find a hierarchy or a value structure that helps in that. If you're really good at fucking painting, then go into art. You know, it's like, don't go into like American football, because you're probably not going to do that great. And I think like, touching on your point of like, I'm going to quickly relate it back to the lobster thing. It's like, if they lose a fight, they go down in the pecking order, and then their core of their brain updates. Okay, so it then goes, oh, we fell 2 places in the pecking order. So then it updates, and then what happens is the behavior that manifests from that updating of the core of the brain, then like behavior manifests that shows that you were lower down the pecking order. So then what happens is another lobster sees that they are lower down the pecking order and treats it as such. So what it happens is like, it's a cycle. So
not only do you feel it, but other people treat you as if, based on the way you behave because of what's happened to you.
Yeah, and so and that's why like his whole point about like, you know, if you stand up straight, if you act confident, then you're going to be perceived as more confident, and therefore you'll be treated as such, and therefore like you will be updated, your brain will be updated and be like, okay, well maybe I am higher up this pecking order. You know, which, and I think what's quite interesting is over the years, obviously, like our brains have adapted, and it's like have grown other areas to it. But it's on top of that kind of that core.
So, we got that from the maps of meaning, but it's true, isn't it?
It's because then it means that like when that core updates, whether it goes up or down in the hierarchy, it's everything else is then like updated, and then your behavior manifests.
I think the best way of he explains it is like evolution is conservative, isn't it? So it's not like you start with the system which was built 300 million years ago, in like lobsters, right? And then, like you said, the brain develops on top of that original core. So if that is the core and that belief, so for example, like you just said, this is monitoring your hierarchy, like place. And therefore it's connected to the rest, because the rest has grown from that original amount. The moment that starts going down here, it manifests across your entire, this is what you're trying to say, right? It manifests across your entire brain. It's really interesting as well, because I think there's obviously the main point I think he says is like, I think it's metaphorical and at the same literal, this idea of putting your shoulders back. So metaphorical in the sense of, if you are highly dominant or more dominant, you tend to have the body posture of shoulders back and head up.
Yeah.
And that is like a prerequisite and also a consequence of being high dominant. So like, if you just put your shoulders back, it makes you feel a bit more dominant, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the literal side of it. And then the metaphorical side of it is like the idea of putting your shoulders back and facing a challenge and progressing. I think was his other point, like realizing that putting your shoulders back and taking on the challenge or trying to tackle a dominance hierarchy, whatever one it is you decide, is the way to live life. Not to be meek, or not to be like hidden, like I, for example, you suck at like I don't know, you suck at a specific sport, like try something else, like find something where your particular strengths will like sort of, I was gonna say be uplifted. It still works, doesn't it?
Yeah. And this doesn't mean that like you can't excel at that sport. It just means accepting that like, you know, there are like people do have differences genetically, okay, and that they will have a higher propensity towards certain things, and if they happen to fall into that category that they like or that hierarchy, if they are 6'2" and they happen to like basketball, then they're probably going to do very well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you can't do well if you're 5'2". It just means that realistically, you know, someone's got a better advantage. I think what's interesting is like I wonder if like realistically dominance in terms of power is like the first kind of hierarchy.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? As in like everything comes back to like I was just thinking about those little birds that you see in like the David Attenborough documentaries where they dance. They make a little dance, or they like create a little they like get all the colourful pieces of ribbon and like put it in their thing, which is a different hierarchy. It's like they're better at that than others. But I think what's interesting is that realistically, at the end of the day, if you're a much bigger fucking bird, you're gonna fuck up that small little bird. Do you know what I mean?
I guess if you go back to true Darwinian,
exactly,
like if you can harm somebody else, it's the ultimate power.
Yeah.
As long as, unlike the difference is right in social species like humans, you got reputation. People
this is
you,
it,
and you get punished for being too dominating. Whereas in other like elephant seals, they don't have a social mechanisms for like reputation. They just the biggest seal.
We don't live really
the chick seals and.
We don't really live in a dominant hierarchy. I wonder if you see it more in like teenagers that haven't learned to develop their kind of own kind of curiosity or their own kind of hierarchy in which they fit into, and so you get a lot of like the jock is like normally the biggest fucking guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but then it's like where I would actually think of it is like mini cultures. So like you got the jock within the jocks who then they dominate based on probably sporting prowess.
That makes sense.
Like you have like mini cultures playing their own dominance hierarchies. Like at school you'd have people pretending to be popular, being popular, but like that was what they were aiming for. And you have other people who are doing other things, and you're all trying to carve out your own like. Is other way I look at it is like trying to carve out your own little mini niches that people can appreciate you for. Yeah. You're the people who love music and unbelievable music at school. Like, and that's kind of the way, and that's the way society has it. Just in my head, it has loads of mini little dominance hierarchies of people playing little games. And I think he said something really interesting, which is like this idea of everybody thinks cooperation and competition, are opposites, like polar opposites, but they're not. Because to compete, you have to agree on the rules. Yeah. So therefore, you're cooperating to agree on the rules before you compete.
You're agreeing to the rules of the hierarchy, and then
exactly that. You agree to what's valued in that.
Within that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it is like. I think from that, I really got this sense of you should go out, dip your toe into as many different like things, like have your hands, like your fingers in so many pies, and try so many different things because you don't know. And like the problem is with school, I think it's very. Like to be fair, you do try a lot of sports, but it's like just try as many things as you like, find what you really like and you really get on with, and that like you can excel at, and then kind of.
I was going to say like I think another thing that really motivates people is progress. So the whole point of this serotonin thing is like you tend to like you get that hit of serotonin etc. when you make progress. Yeah. In a value structure, which is essentially the hierarchy. So if you feel like you're making progress towards something, like you've learned a new skill. Like, so for example, if you're doing something and you're not monitoring your progression, you're not going to get the satisfaction of somebody who is. And my understanding is, off the topic of this, that the reason why video games are so addictive is because they notify you of the progress you're making, and they make it very obvious. So like, in a story, or like, it depends what type of video game, but if you've got like a story video game, like your progression in the story is showing that you've like progressed, obviously. But then you have other things which show you how many kills you're getting or whatever. They give you the stats based on what you're doing, so you see the progress, if that makes sense. And that's where those stuff are very fulfilling almost. So like if you're just going about things without having an idea of how to get better at something, you're probably not going to get passionate about anything. In my head, I feel like you can only grow passion through the progress.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I think so.
It's just like going to do something for the sake of it. Like fine, I think a load of people think that's the way you do it. Like you should be passionate. You should just do things because you want to do them. But it's like you want to do them, but how do you want to do them? You have to have the positive emotions of progress to want to do them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like literally, in my head, that's why do people not like work? Because it's not really like a choice, and they haven't made. And half the time they don't make progress. They don't know what the fuck progress is in terms of work, right? Yeah. That's why work's unfulfilling for the majority of people. So this idea of like, finding a value hierarchy, finding something you want to do, or some game you want to play with a bunch of people. You can create your own game, he says, but I think that's for people who. I'd almost say that creating your own game is when you're so talented at something you can just create like a hybrid or like something slightly different to the old game and create like a new. If you get me, but you have to have something about you. But basically, another thing you're saying, which is pretty brutal. I think this is very male orientated. To be fair, this specific chapter in general as well, because in general, girls care less about dominance than males. That's not necessarily the whole truth, but on average, I'm trying to think what else he was saying, because that's pretty much it I got from it. He went deep into like chaos and order, but I don't know if you wanted to jump into that now because it's quite deep. So I think the best way of explaining this as well, because if somebody's never heard of Peterson or 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson likes to go very deep into sort of like mythology, like the nature of like, I want to say everything as you experience it. So he has this idea of, he uses the idea of the yin and the yang for like chaos and order. So chaos is when or where something happens where you didn't predict it. So a trivial version of that would be like you're at a party and you tell a joke and nobody laughs. I mean, the whole point you told the joke really, obviously, is because you wanted people to laugh. And the chaos is the fact that what you wanted to happen didn't. So basically chaos is whatever happens which you didn't predict, which unfortunately for us, as we are pretty naive species, is pretty often. And in order is stuff that we know and is explored and it's like things we're comfortable with. And he honestly goes so deep into what the actual differences is. So like order, for example, is where the place where the behaviour of the world matches our expectations. So like we're in order when Tristan behaves the way I want him to behave. And if I met him one time and he was behaving weird, or like he had like some weird twinge about him, I would then I wouldn't understand it. So therefore a bit of chaos and I would question stuff. So like, I guess the best way of saying it is order is when you know what everything is. And whenever something doesn't go quite to plan or something weird happens, that's when you're in chaos and you have to make sense of it. And I think one of the ways I always think about this is if I'm walking down the street and I see something in a normal place which is weird. So if I see I'm walking down the street and there's a normal person but he's like walking a bit weird or he's drunk or something, that makes me pay attention like shit, unexpected chaos. And it's quite it's really hard to appreciate it until you start really thinking about everything.
Like it's everywhere. It's basically like we're human beings that first of all like to categorize everything. We like to simplify everything. We basically are just trying to constantly create rules. We see patterns and then we predict. It's like we basically just want everything to be in its place every time so that we can, navigate the world. But the problem is that the world is forever changing and we're not accurate enough in our predictions to predict everything. Like you would never be able to like
you think about things that go wrong in your life.
Think about the weather. Like the weather you can't even really predict, even though they try. It's like anything can fucking happen. You could be driving home and suddenly get hit by a car. It's like you didn't see that coming. And
that's the manifestation of chaos in your life, and that's too bad. Exactly. That's a very traumatic version of it. And the small version of it would be you put your keys somewhere you don't remember. Chaos, the unknown of where the fuck the keys are, and you have like a mini panic. You do the same with your phone. If you're really attached to something like your phone, you put it in the wrong pocket and you fuck my phone. Chaos.
Exactly.
What the hell is it? Order is when you restore that to like somebody stole it. That's the really bad chaos because not only have they stole your phone, but are they going to sell it? Are they going to get onto your phone? Like what are they going to do? That type of thing. That's like a multi-ordered chaos. It's chaos of what's happened and then the potential consequences of what's happened. Whereas the potential of I've left it somewhere in my house is not scary. It's like it's going to be here somewhere.
Yeah. And then when you find your phone, that's you turning that chaos into order again.
I was going to say, interestingly, because he brought this chaos and order up in this chapter, he talked about this idea that the higher the serotonin, the more order you've got. So in the sense of where you stand on the dominance hierarchy because you're at the fucking top of it. You've managed to turn all the chaos of the performance or whatever you're doing, whether it's acting or whether it's physical prowess. You manage to turn that to order. You know where you stand. And this idea that something comes up and trips you up, like somebody comes out of nowhere who's better than you at it and beats you, will put you into a state of chaos. And this chaos manifests as like a lower serotonin level.
I think that's, adding on that point, what's really interesting is when you do fall down that ladder, or when you do get taken down a couple of pegs, you are in more need for resources than the person who's above you, because they're more able to get it. So you're almost on more high alert. And what's interesting from that is that, like, you need to be on alert because you need to constantly be looking for resources, okay? But the problem is that uses up a lot of energy, and like it creates stress and things like that. And so one of his main points was like creating a routine. If you can create order in everyday little things, okay, then you can you can save some of that energy because you put it in order, and then go and look for other resources to help you climb up that ladder again.
An interesting idea as well, this is like, what language do you use to explain whenever you're like in a state of anxiety or stress? It's always like stuff's getting out of control, it's out of my hands, or like I'm losing control of reality, I'm losing control of my life. It's always based on control, and this is back to the order. Order is control. It's like controlling what's happening to you. So like if you're stressed, it's usually because you don't have a plan for what's happened to you. So something happens to you, like, oh fuck, I'm stressed now. Like, it's because you haven't brought order to the new information that's just come in. So like, let's say you get to the airport and you've got no passport, you're fucking stressed. You now know you're probably not going somewhere. Why? Because the original order of the original plan is gone. You have to have a new plan, and until you make the decision what the new plan is, you're going to be stressed out. If you then go, fuck, there's another plane in a couple of hours time, and they're going to manage, I've spoken to somebody, and now they're going to, I'm going to get on that next plane. I mean, obviously you're probably going to have the chaos of the fucking changing your bloody taxi on the other end, but at the same time, you have got some firm footing on reality again. But when you don't have that firm footing, you are in a state of anxiety. And that's the point.
You have to accept that original plan you have is now not going to work because you forgot your fucking passport, and now you need to burn that plan and create a new one with this new piece of information. And it's like, well, this wasn't so much in the book, but he was talking about this in terms of like the phoenix, it's like you have something, it dies, and then it's reborn. And that's that new plan, and that's you, like, that's growing basically. It's like the hero story of overcoming adversity. This
is where it gets really deep. And to be fair, if you're like, it's so hard. I found it so hard to explain to anybody unless you've read and you've tried to get into the mindset that he's operating off. Do you get what I mean? Like, saying order and chaos, I reckon to most, it's like, what the fuck are these two nutcases on about? But it's but it's like, even in the past, the yin and the yang symbol is literally basically order and chaos, and how the little dots are resemblance of the fact that there's always chaos and order. Back into, I'm gonna try and attempt it.
Right,
back in the wall garden of Adam and Eve. The idea of the wall garden is the order of your mind, and then you are Adam and Eve, and the devil comes up and he is the chaos. It's just, it sounds bizarre.
To start off, I'd say, like, throughout this book, Jordan Peterson uses a lot of stories to illustrate his points, and a lot of these stories are either Greek mythology or basically the Bible. A lot of it is very religious, and I think the reason why he's attempting to do that is because they're like the oldest stories. They're the stories that we know, and also that the West has been built on through like Christianity and everything like that. So it's kind of so ingrained in us. We all know what, like, Noah and his ark, and Jesus on the cross and everything like that. So I think what he's trying to say is that, like,
there's some deep metaphorical meaning to these stories that, like,
there's truth in them, and it's relatable to everyone because we all understand these stories. We all understand the hero. We've all come across adversity, so we can relate to it. And so I think he used these stories to illustrate a lot of his points.
For example, I'll give an example here. Like, the idea of, like, the Phoenix thing is more like every time it's like he's called it like almost like a mini death. Like, your life up to this point, and then something goes wrong, so now you're in a state of like, this is not true, so I need to find a new thing. So a new plan. Then you find the new plan, and you're reborn with this new plan that you're going to go along with. So your whole life is like, get to this point, oh shit, something just happened. You adapt to the new situation, you go up. And this is like signified metaphorically or mythically by the rebirth of the phoenix, because... And the idea is, actually, I'm not even going to go into that. I was about to say the Jung cell. I continue to, I can't. Right.
But that's it. So I think basically, the first chapter, what we were trying to say is,
right now, like,
Jesus. It is interesting because I've never before this, I've never really read about.
I've never cared about it.
Like, I never cared. I've never thought about the Bible at all, and it's like, yeah, okay, you've got some interesting stories in there, but they're just stories. But now I kind of see the relevance of stories because it's a means of relating
our experience to
a truthful concept. Like, I'm gonna try and talk about what we were talking about the other day in terms of science, okay? Science. Yeah. No, basically, as in, like, you can't understand what it's like to be a billion atoms. You can't comprehend that. Like, you can understand the fact, but you can't comprehend it. Okay, it's too finite or whatever. Finite.
As I say,
Jesus Christ.
Finite.
Or like too specific. Yeah. So you need something that's kind of like zoomed out and has that essence of truth in it, but like it's relatable to. I can relate to a story of someone failing and then overcoming that failure, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why stories have come about and they're still around for so long is because people can read it, all the context is there, but they're able to abstract the like concept.
The morals, you can relate to the hero in the story and the motivations he's feeling. This is why I kind of feel like something happens to him and he's feeling this motif of like revenge, but like that you feel that motif because you are the hero in the story at that point. So like there's like a common humanity. Stories like common humanity, the things we feel as we watch them. Like the films which are in my head, like which go just full flat, are the ones which don't have this common theme that we can all get to. Like so, for example,
emotions.
Yeah, exactly. Like the new movies which are like just bloody big monsters whacking each other. Like there's no common humanity story to it. Like the only reason you watch that is because you like special effects.
Yeah,
like the South Park with Michael Bay, like
literally.
That's literally how you describe those movies.
But is that, I think it's because it has more of an emotional relationship, then it's more relatable than fact. Mm-hmm. We can't relate to fact, but we can relate to emotions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, should we head on to
mate,
chapter 2? Otherwise we're going to be here for days.
To be honest, most of my notes are kind of in like a weird order, mate, so we'll just like, treat yourself as if you're somebody. Here we go. Yeah, so the next one's to treat yourself as if you're someone responsible for helping, isn't it?
Yes.
So I got like the last comment of this, like, so treat yourself as if you're someone you are responsible for helping is to consider what could be truly good for you. It's not what you want or what would make you happy, it's what's truly good for you. So like every time you give a child something sweet, you make that child happy. That doesn't mean you've done nothing. Happy is by no means synonymous with good. Yeah. He just talks about like, you should look at what's going to help you, not what's like you want or what you think is going to make you happy. If that's kind of the moral of it.
Well, this, I think I tie this into my kind of idea of like the 51-49. Like, basically, to help someone, if you just help them 100% with a problem, you're not helping them build the foundation. So if they ever come across that problem again, they're never going to be able to solve that problem because you didn't give them the tools to help them do it. It's like that old saying. It's like, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Give a man a fishing rod or whatever and you feed him for a week or a lifetime.
Teach him how to fish.
Yeah, teach him how to fish. That's the one.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's like you want to be able to. I personally I can see this idea of like, you don't want to help someone more than 50% because as soon as you do that, then an aspect of dependency happens and they become dependent on you. So next time they have a problem, it's like that it may be 51% the first time, then it goes to 60, 65, 70, and before you know it, basically they're just so dependent on you that they can't do anything. And it's the whole like kind of, he talks a lot about this in terms of parenting. And it's like when parents do so much for their kids, and I guarantee you would have come across someone in life.
I think almost in yourself to some dimension, there might be a dimension where they did too much for you, and then when you're let out of the world, maybe like cleaning,
this is it, yeah,
or like just doing your clothes or washing your clothes, and you're suddenly like, fuck, how do I wash my clothes?
But we all know, like I know so many people that are like that, and like just living with mates or whatever, you see certain things that you wouldn't. And like I'm guilty of it as well, but it's like
in different dimensions. People have different.
Yeah, exactly. It's just in different areas. But like if you're not taught how to solve the problem yourself, then you will never be able to do it. It's not like you will suddenly know how to do it the next time.
Yeah. I think interestingly on that note, like this reminds me of back to the chaos order again. So like you have order when somebody's doing something for you. So if I can expect to like, I live with my family, I can expect them to, I don't know, fucking do my ironing, for example. It's probably a pretty common one, I assume.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you leave and you don't know how to do the ironing because you're dependent, and that is chaos
guilty
again.
Of that.
That's chaos. Well, it's not. To be honest, I don't think it's like not. It's not even not knowing. You almost like you don't want to do it. It's boring, and they've done it all your life. You just be like, oh, fucking, I don't want to do my
It's
learning.
also what I think is interesting is like you're kind of ignorant of the fact that it's even a problem in the first place because someone has always solved it.
Until you have to do it.
And then it's like, fuck, wait, I actually have to...
South Park episode, Amazon. If Amazon stopped delivering in one day, where the fuck are you going to get your stuff? That was the model.
It is, yeah, literally.
Like, we're so used to, like, you know, knowing how to deal with a problem. Like, this is why, actually, I think parents are very... people come to appreciate their parents more when they leave home, because they can go back and ask the questions. So when you're at home, you're not doing the stuff they're doing, such as like sorting out insurance, sorting out all this, like all the shit that you think you don't need to do, and you suddenly move out. Now you're like, oh crap, I need to do it. Yeah. They're the people you go, hey, my car's broken down, how do you fix it?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, my light's gone, or what would you do? Oh, I can't iron, like what's going on? And the people who didn't ask those questions never get it sorted, and they end up living in a shithole, I've decided. That's like the way, like you almost tell who's taking, but this is back to responsibility as well.
Yeah.
Are you somebody who takes responsibility when there's a problem, or like when something needs to be done, or do you just go, somebody would do it eventually? And like the ethos of like, somebody will fix it for me, ends up. Well, I mean, we've spoken about this. I'm not going to go too deep because I don't think it is. It's back to like, if you're dependent on somebody. I was going to go into like the welfare state, but it's a bit like too political. It's like, if you can't fend for yourself to a degree, and this is not the same for some people who actually need it, but like you create people who are dependent on something which they can't then learn how to do because they're dependent on it. So, and then they end up, and then you see how they live without this, because they can't do it themselves. You then let them go by themselves, and they all just capitulate because they've never learned how to do it, whether it's manage money or anything. And
it's interesting. I think then like, from a parent's point of view, you kind of want to introduce your child to as many like possible problems that there are out there, but not all at once because it's overwhelming and that is chaotic.
I actually see,
I
was gonna say like almost like the biggest stress in somebody's life when multiple things happen at the same time.
Well,
so you can't put your kid through like solve this, and this. Basically you got to give them. In my head, the best way would be to help them solve the problems together at first, and then you start slowly letting them solve their own problems, and that's how you build responsibility in somebody. Because the moment they need somebody else to solve their problems, don't get me wrong, by the way, there's a reason why experts exist, and it's to help you solve problems. Yeah. But core problems of like living and taking care of yourself should be taken responsible by yourself. It shouldn't be somebody else. Because the moment you do that, you take away the back to the progress thing. If you're not making progress on solving your own problems, you start to see yourself as somebody who can't solve their own problems, and then they have to look to other things to solve their problems. And they think they're worthless, and they don't want to help themselves because they can't solve their problems because they have such low serotonin as well, based on this loop of like, I can't solve my problems.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. Because it's like, I'm needy. I need someone to solve this for me, and then it's like, well, you're low down level, and it just the cycle keeps going. Yeah. It's interesting though, because I think you're ignorant that there's even a problem in the world until you experience life and then you come across that problem. So the more I think someone is able to like introduce you to these problems, give you the tools to fix it, and also like a lot of these tools, they're transferable tools. Like you can solve 10 other kind of problems that are similar to the one that you're being taught how to solve.
Yeah. I think what's interesting as well is we've got the ultimate tool for problem solving. It's called Google. And it's called just Google it and just read a blog on it. Like honestly, I remember like my last job was literally doing SEO, and I had to train myself in SEO, and it took like 2 months. Like literally, that's it. Yeah, just read Google
because
stuff.
exactly.
If you, it just comes back to this idea. Like this is the thing, you've got to make people want to solve the problem. But if you solve the problem for them, they don't care about it. But if you give them the problem to solve, they'll eventually have to solve it, or they'll live in a bad way because we have this consistent problem in front of their faces.
And this doesn't mean that like you can't get help, of course, and there's like so many people that do need help, and obviously, they should get it. But
the help also should be like rehabilitation, where you're helping them develop a self which takes responsibility and improves their being.
I think
not like you're going to come here and I'm going to help you all your help, I'm going to do everything for you, and then you're going to be exactly the same place before. Yeah, we're going to help you like become the person who can deal with it.
Yeah, I think like you have to do your utmost first before you ask for help, because as soon as you know where your bridge point is and you can't get any further, then someone else can be like, okay, well, I'll teach you how to get a tiny bit further, and then that pushes your like baseline up, and so it's like next time when you do it, it's like you get that far rather than just this far, and you keep improving, and that's progress. That's improving. And it's like
interesting. I'm reading some of the stuff he said there as well, like consider this failure is easy to understand, no explanation for its existence is required. It's not easy to shoulder burden. Yeah, it's basically
Like, it's very stoic as well.
It's very
at the end of the
stoic,
day, in terms of like, put your highest self into something, be present, don't be putting in energy.
It's easier
into
not
the
to shoulder a
future and
burden.
past,
It's
but,
easier
like,
not to think, easier not to do, and easier not to care. It's easier to put off until tomorrow what needs to be done today and drown the upcoming months in the yesterday's pleasures. Kind of makes sense. It's on the same topic of like the problem with taking responsibility for things is you have to shoulder the burden of actually doing it. Like, and if you hadn't had to have the weight of doing something, like this is, I feel like I was saying this to you yesterday. This is the whole my realization. Like, becoming an adult is like becoming responsible for more things. Like, think about it. When you have a kid, then you're like, that's the utmost responsibility because you have another life you're responsible for. And like, you should not have a kid, in my opinion, until you've managed to hold the responsibility of your own life. If you can't carry the weight of your own life, don't try and think you can carry the weight of another life.
Well, I get it. Even without having kids, I think basically the accumulation of life, of years of time on this fucking planet, okay, you acquire these problems. Now, over that time, you probably solve all of them, but that doesn't mean that like they'll never happen again. So you almost accumulate this backpack of problem-solving techniques, but it can get heavy. And so the more you when you start having a family, then you come across more problems and more and more and more. And so it does become heavy. So I think it is your job at the end of the day to become responsible to
and solve the problems yourself.
Exactly.
You know, do you know what I mean? Like, the more you ignore problems, fuck, get out of my way, like flies, and you're like, shit. You know, don't talk about these problems. They don't exist. It's like the dragon; it gets big. An interesting example. I've gone back to the Order and Chaos game because I was just thinking about problems. It's like your car breaks down. How many of you know how to fix a fucking car? Your dishwasher breaks down. Fine, you can use fairy liquid and clean your plates that way. But you know, if something breaks down and you've been relying on it, this is when like chaos manifests because you do realise. Fine, another example. You got stuck in the woods and you had to survive. What the fuck would you do? You're not a hunter gatherer.
Yeah.
You've been buying stuff at Sainsbury's.
like,
is this sort of thing where like almost the institutions and like consumerism in general has created solutions to problems. Like, I want to fucking clean my dishes. Oh, got a dishwasher for that. I want to wash my clothes. What do you call it?
Washing machine.
Washing machine. Jesus, I was going to call it clothes washer. Jesus Christ. There you go. That's a problem.
It's been a long week. Yeah.
Yeah. But that type of thing. All these things solve specific problems, and when they don't work,
then we realise that we never had the tools to solve it.
And you don't realise these problems exist until you face them. So you're living at home. Your parents are probably doing all your problems for you. Growing up is taking on those problems.
Yeah.
Just grabbing that bloody backpack, like you said, and just filling it full of fucking problems and taking them with you as you go.
Yeah.
Like you could argue something like Amazon. The reason why they're so successful is they solve the problem of if you want something immediately, you can get it. Yeah. If you want anything, you can get it. Like that's literally it. That's why they're so successful.
It makes you. What's interesting is like I had a lecture last month, my last week of uni or whatever. But we was talking about habituation and sensitization. It's like the more you do something, the more habituated you become to it, and the like easier it becomes, automated, that kind of thing. But the flip side of the coin is like, you know, the less you do it, the less like you come into contact with it, the more sensitive you are to it. To a degree, take here or there. Yeah. But what's interesting is like the less you do something, like, you know, you become super sensitive when suddenly a problem occurs because you've never actually come across it. And like, you're suddenly sensitive and you're like, oh God, I actually don't know how to...
So what I think what's quite interesting as well is like it's the same with computers. When your computer doesn't work, how often do you're like fucking stupid computer, like, because with this sort of stuff as well, it's so hard to figure out what is wrong because with a computer there's so many different like intricate little parts. It could be any one of them. Yeah. It's so complex. That's why the way to fix a computer is off and on.
Mate,
literally think about it. Like, how do you fix your Wi-Fi? Okay, off and on, and it seems to work almost every time because you just whatever was blocking something or other, you just completely got rid of it and now start afresh.
Yeah.
And that's most apps. What do apps do when they fail? They quit and they restart because that's how you deal with something which is ultimately complex. Like,
it is so interesting actually when you think that like everything seems so simple.
Yes.
Until there is a problem, and then as soon as that problem occurs, basically you're just looking through everything with like a chaos lens because you just see so much complexity. When when something goes wrong with your computer, after you try it on and off and it doesn't work, there are a million different things you could do.
Then
and it's
if
like,
you've got an Apple computer, there's calling up the Apple bloody genius.
Literally.
Can you help me? I got some interesting ideas here as well from...
shoot.
But like I can't remember what chapter they're from. It's going to really piss me off. It was about heroes and judgment, but I don't know whether it's this... I don't know whether it was that last chapter that we were just talking about or not. So... obviously, so rule 3 was make friends with people who want the best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether this might still be part of, is it still part of it? Anyway, I think the whole point of the make friends with people who want the best for you is more about, do you have any stuff from it? What page is it going onwards?
No, rule 3. So yeah, make friends with people who.
Because the one point I wanted to jump onto, but I just don't relate it to the chapter at all. But it could have been in the chapter because, to be honest, with these chapters, I have to say his rules, the chapter kind of like just goes so meandering around this like massive topic, and then it just brings it back at the very end.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to talk about here is this idea of the hero's judgment, and what I mean by this is. A good example is a challenge to yourself and a judge. So the idea that the Michelangelo statue, the perfect naked marble man, is a challenge and a judge of you, because when you see it, you see what you could be, like what the human body could be. So you feel like almost inferior to it. Like all the gods are always the same, always big, muscular. Like the hero is the judge. He's the judge of your character, because when you see it, you judge yourself through that person. So and this is what's quite interesting. I think. Maybe it relates to this chapter in the sense that like you want friends who want the best for you. You want friends who, if you become a good example, don't try and pull you down. Because it takes a real big character to be around people who are like, we're none of us are fucking heroes, but like somebody who's trying to be a hero, trying to set a good example. It takes a lot to be around somebody like that, because it will make you judge yourself. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Well, I think the big point that I got from this chapter is this idea that he talks about is like, it's so much easier to go down than up. Now, when I say that, like he uses these quite like apocalyptic words, almost like as in to go down to hell rather than up to heaven. Yeah. But what I think he's trying to say is that it takes you could do nothing. It's much easier to be lazy and, have people solve your problems for you and those kinds of things.
Be really cynical and like, being like, oh, life doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, or just like,
life is so hard. Like, it's a good excuse for me to do nothing. Okay, so it's much easier to go down than it is to overcome that all that adversity and improve. So I think a big point that I got from this is that like, we all have that kind of aspect in us to try and fix people in a way, especially in like relationships. But like with friend groups, it's like you can try to pull someone up, but most of the time you're probably going to be pulled down. It's quite hard, and it's like you want to be around people that are constantly like
pulling you up.
Yeah, you're all pulling each other up. You're all like in such a conducive environment, and I think your environment matters so much in terms of like, you just pick up the same behavior as other people like around you. You're an adapting machine. Like so, if someone is like got all these terrible habits. Like we literally just had like a week of boozing and it just like, even though you want to stay productive, it's so much easier to just go,
especially after, because you're not motivated and you feel like you've set a bad example for yourself, so it makes you even less if you're gonna get, because you're comparing yourself to, once again, then you pick up a perfect example of somebody who never does it, and then you compare yourself to that and you think you're so far off the ideal. But this is it's so easy to like fall into the trap. So like in our generation with Instagram and Facebook and all this sort of stuff, they're very visual mediums. So like what seems to be the case from what I can see is in Instagram, the visual nature of value of humans goes up. So what I mean by that is the beauty is put to the hierarchy of Instagram. So in my head, in the hierarchy of Instagram, beauty is rewarded.
Success is defined as like
success is defined as beautiful. It's a visual medium. It's a visual medium. Yeah. If you were talking about like, in fact, you know what actually I like is actually, you could argue creativity is rewarded quite well. So like funny skits, like comedy and stuff. That's creative manifestations of culture, isn't it? It's like creating a skit or a funny video is like taking something somebody would expect, doing something novel, making it funny. So that's rewarded also. But I would say, because it's a visual medium, it's mainly like beauty in that. And then you've got other stuff like
I think also, just to add on that quickly, is like, because it is just like a visual app, you don't see context, and so you don't see the adversity that people overcame to get to that. So you get this skewed idea of what success is. This is a bit off topic, but like, you get this skewed idea of what success is, and you think that, oh well, it's just so easy, everyone just keeps succeeding, and like they don't actually have to go through any like, that's, if you can only go down or up, and it's much easier to go down, it's distorting to suddenly see someone that's like, oh well, I just keep going up and it's fucking easy. But it's not. It's really not.
I think also it's like back to this like judge thing. It's like you like you said, you see the successes, you see these people on like beautiful holidays, they're smashing life, right? They are a judge. They didn't mean to be, but they are a judge because their existence questions yours. The moment you see them, you're like, fucking hell, I wish I could live that. I wish I could live that life. I wish I could be that funny. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. And that's pretty hard on yourself. Bearing in mind, we talked about this like wide range of dominance hierarchies, and like that's their game. They're winning. They're very high up in that game. You are comparing yourself to the highest of the high. Yeah. If they've got 1.1 million followers for being like beautiful, it's probably because they are actually beautiful, and they are the top of that hierarchy at the moment, male or female. And to judge yourself by the highest standard is like, and I think he talks about here as well, like we think in black or white categories the same as like left, right, success, failure. Like it's back to this like book I was reading on logic. It's like what about the grey areas?
Binary, yeah. It's like what about
you see black, white, but there's a million different like shades in between.
Yeah.
A million like success in terms of what? Better, worse, or best, worst. Sorry.
Yeah.
What's the best?
Actually, what's interesting?
Like, what is the best? What is the worst? Nobody fucking asks these questions.
Well, this is it. This is what like we've been talking about this quite a lot over the last couple of days. But as in, like, it depends how you measure success. Yeah. Okay, if you're an amazing sportsman and you're not a great artist, like don't be measuring yourself in like an artist kind of hierarchy. You know, it doesn't make sense. It's like there's way more ways to live life, and making money is not the only one, or wealth. It's like success matters it's like subjective to you. It's like, you know, if you want to be the best artist in the world, then that's the way that you measure yourself. You don't measure yourself on like, you know, whether you have massive fucking arms or something like that. You know, it's like,
I do.
Well, yeah, like it helps, but
yeah. I know, I completely get what you mean. It's interesting more because whatever somebody measures actually tends to like reveal what they value. It's like the dimensions you compare yourself to others is almost like it shows
what
in yourself what you're looking.
Important.
Yeah, exactly, what you consider to be important. And I wonder if I'm thinking out loud here. Yeah. Like it's like you almost compare yourself to what you like your insecurity, or like the thing you're worried about the most. You then look to as a measurement because it's like what you want to improve. So you look at the best of that.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So I wonder if like somebody who's really skinny and wants to be really muscly would then look to them and then get down about it because it's the one thing they want to improve.
Yeah.
But then they beat themselves up even more. If that makes sense. Because I don't know. I guess the best way of looking at this as well is actually thinking about this idea that Peterson always talks about is like you're always in point A going to point B. So the state of insufficiency where you are now is never going to be good enough for you. That's the human curse because you always want to be somewhat better, and it's usually based on like evolutionary reasons. So for example, sexual, like you want to be more attracted to the opposite sex. So like the A to B, you want to be, so if you're a boy, you probably want to be stronger, fitter, you want to be higher in the dominance hierarchy. So you always want to be there. Yeah. Even if you're at the top, you want to be higher. There's always a higher place. And this idea that like, this is back to what you're saying, like there's people already there, doesn't mean you should be upset because you've just started your journey if you've only just started contemplating it, you know? Yeah. If you've only just gone like, oh, no, I want to do this, you are at the beginning, don't compare yourself to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And to be honest, quite a lot of these motivational, I find it quite interesting how some people like, they feel like they have to do everything so young. Granted, there are a few things. I would say putting on muscle mass probably pretty hard when you're like 70. So, and also, you're not going to be fucking... Back then, actually, that's another point. You're not going to be interested in trying to attract girls when you're 70 years old, I don't think.
Well...
I don't think. You don't know.
I don't know. I'll play this to you when you're 70.
What matters, like, different age groups actually have different things they want as well. Yeah. Kind of get me.
Yeah.
And that changes sort of the values and the actions
they
take.
What's important to you, I think, changes. Your values change over time.
But that's the point of like going to A to B and failing and then going, okay, right. Or maybe like you have a point, you want to get to this point here, and then something happens in your life. Like let's just say you are an insecure person, and you want to be attracted to girls. So you want to get here. Then you meet somebody who's just like then taking you off, and you're like, oh, well, I don't need to do that anymore. Yeah. Do you get me? And then your life goals will change based on what happens to you because you thought you wanted that, but you've already achieved something which like got you what you wanted without having to go to that extra step. Yeah. So like another one could be you want to live, you want to do your dream job, and you think you need, or you want to live freely because you need enough money to get there. So you need to get this point B with money, and then you get something happens to you, and you realize, oh shit, I don't need the money, and then your life changes a different perspective.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, I'm going to talk about this even if it's not relevant in this chapter, because I think it's important. He talks a lot about goals, but like meta goals, like big goals that like, how do I explain it? So for instance, like, you know, if you work for someone, you're reliant on them to a degree. So let's say your job suddenly goes, it's like, what do you have? You need something to continuously like pull you through, something that you still belong to a hierarchy that is giving you incentive to improve. Okay, so like one that we quite like is pursuit of knowledge. It's like, no matter if I lose a job, I can still read a book. Do you know what I mean? So I can still improve, and I can do it.
It can't be taken away from you almost.
You've got agency, you've got control over it. That's why I think a lot of like entrepreneurs or people that own their own businesses really enjoy it, because they can work to their own kind of accord, and they can improve how much ever they want to improve, or they can like slow down. Like, they're in charge of the pace at which they improve at.
Yeah.
And going back to your point about like, your values change. If you suddenly have a family, it's going to very much change. But what's interesting is like, a lot of people sacrifice their time because you belong to a lot of hierarchies. You've got a job, you've got a family, you've got other things going on. A lot of people sacrifice the time with their families to work more. So their value of like work is higher up than their family one. And I think this is where it's really important to have an overarching goal of like, he talks about a meta goal of like being better, just like being a better you. So to be a better you, that's like basically increasing all of the hierarchies that you're in. So it's like pulling all of them up. So you've got to, yes, you can improve at work, but if you're not improving at family, then you're not becoming that better person. You've got to, all of them incrementally kind of increase.
Like a cross-domain
exactly.
improvement, yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is very important.
I think what's interesting as well, the better thing is more like, it's really subjective, but like everybody kind of knows what it would take to be a better person.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to the gym more, whether it's drinking less alcohol, whether it's, all those sort of things. Everybody kind of has a rough idea. Spend more time with your family.
Yeah.
Speak to your parents more, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's like, there is always like a potential goal above all the others that would pull, like as you said, pull you up as a person.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
I can't remember what chapter we're on.
I think now we're on 4. Like we've taken little detours. We talked about make friends, but it was very similar. I thought it was quite similar to chapter 2 in terms of like, a lot of it is you want to help your friends out, but like, once again, you can't be doing all the work. You can't be pulling them all the way up, because you're going to actually be pulled down. So you've got to give them the tools. Once again, going back to like, give them the tools to solve their own problems,
and then let them see things solve.
Yeah, without sacrificing your ability to improve at the same time.
Yeah. What's number 4, mate?
What is number 4? It is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone is today.
He talks about the internal critic from the start. Good, I got a note.
Yes.
When the internal critic puts you down, I like this one because it makes a lot of sense, and I've experienced it quite a bit. So, when the internal critic puts you down, here's how it operates. So, first it selects an arbitrary domain of comparison. So, usually, like back to the hierarchy. So, fame, potentially power, potentially money, potentially beauty, potentially all the stuff which you would say that humans are interested in because it increases the chance of being worthy as a human being, sort of thing. Whatever's valued at this moment. So, for example, in Rome, it was valued to be a warrior. Therefore, comparing yourself to warrior, that type of thing. So, then it would act as if that's the only domain that's relevant. So it ignores the fact that you might, let's just say you don't have much money, but the fact that you're a caring, loving person, you're good looking or whatever, it ignores all those. It just picks one out and just says you're not good enough. And then Tive argues that with some people as well, then it will come down to this idea that because it's something like power, which is very like abstract and hard to understand, that it gives rise to this idea that the world's unfair because you're not the top of the power thing because somebody else is and they don't deserve it, but you deserve it. And it's quite interesting because I do think it works that way. Like, your brain's not very good, right, when you thinking in like 2 different directions. You don't really think in 2 different directions. You kind of just think linearly. So it's like, what am I going to compare myself? I'm going to compare myself to this person in this dimension. You don't go, well, I'm going to look at this person as an entirety and then compare myself as... You don't like write like a fucking checklist of like, what's his score out of 10 for this? What's his score out of 10 for this? And then compare it, because that would be a more valid comparison anyway. Because the moment you define it in one domain, there's only one way to beat that person in anything. Like sport as well, it's not like, oh, who's the strongest? It depends what sport you're in. And it depends, every sport has different skills in it. There's not like one domain or one comparison that's actually more right than others, but we seem to always, when we judge ourselves, think there is. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Who's got the most followers? Oh, who gets the most comments?
I think it once again kind of boils down to the point of like how you measure your success. If you're only measuring it in one hierarchy, and it's one that you're struggling in, but also it's like, don't compare yourself to the top of that person at the top of the hierarchy. You know, compare yourself to maybe like the one that's just above you. Everyone like is like, fuck, why don't I have a six pack and like your massive muscles?
I think the main point of this chapter anyway was more like, no matter what, just look at yourself, look at your domains, look at the hierarchies you're traversing, whether it's whether sport, whether your life goals, whatever, and then grab yourself like a fucking marker and be like, give yourself a score almost, like, or at least how many days you did this particular thing, or what weight you're doing in the gym, and then you can start seeing this progress, and you're comparing it to you, not anybody else. And then if you see progress, the meta goal better is pulling you up.
Exactly.
That's what it's all about.
I think what's really interesting, this chapter especially, is like, this is where he talked about like the attentional abilities and how your attention kind of works. So when you pick a goal, for example, your attention works in certain kinds of ways. So basically, the like center of your eye, the fovea, okay, what it looks at is practically like 100% reality. It's exactly how you see it. Now everything over here, or like from your center outwards, okay, it starts to reduce, okay? So you're only seeing like, 95%, 80%, blah, 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 okay? So what your brain does is it projects the rest of that percentage to make 100 of how you think you should see the world. So I don't actually know what's over there, but my brain is going like, okay, I'm filling in the gaps because I can see a bit from my peripheral vision, but then I'm filling in a gap and there's like a plant over there and things like that.
I was talking about the idea that when you look left, you're thinking. Like when most people look left, look up to left.
Oh, look up, yeah.
And I was just thinking that's the left-hand brain, that's where the rules are.
Oh, that's it, fucking
like,
interesting.
You look up and you're trying to think of the rules.
Very numerical as well.
Your eyes are... Okay, this is some... The eyes actually go into different hemispheres, right? So when you look up that way, what the fuck's going on? It's weird. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I get what you mean.
There is like there's a theory, I think it's in neuro-linguistic programming, where your eyes look, it depends what memory source you're looking from. So like looking up there means I always do it when I'm thinking.
Because your right is connected to your left, which is supposedly more logical and system
oriented. Left is meant to be more like where your rules are, where your ideas are like sort of stepped, where your language is kept almost. I'm trying to look up there and trying to say words. It's still working. Anyway. Sorry, that was a really random thought.
That's right.
It's more like attention, where your eyes go.
Anyway, so basically, because there's so much stuff that we don't care about. Okay, we only basically focus on the things that are relevant to us. So if we have a goal, if my goal is to pick up this glass over here, then everything over here is irrelevant.
It ignores the fact there's a razor on the table.
Yeah, it ignores. Well, there we go.
So random.
Your brain won't compute that because it's not relevant to the goal. I don't need to know that.
But your brain will be thinking of a tap.
Yeah.
You immediately pick this up and you go, okay, tap. That's where I'm going to fill up my water.
Yeah, exactly. So, whatever goal you're focusing on, it will deflect anything that's irrelevant and pick up everything that is relevant. So it's basically like confirmation bias constantly. What's interesting though is that a lot of the time we need to be kind of in a state of being able to update our goal just in case something that is like important to us. And for, let's say, if we're applying this to like a meta goal, because you've got so many goals on the go, okay? Yeah. If I'm only focusing on one and I deflect everything else, one of those things coming in might be important for the other goals. So if you have a meta goal, that's what he's talking about, to be a better person, it means even though I'm focusing on this, something might come over here that's important for me as a person, and I can, instead of deflecting that, take that in. Do you go? So we have to like kind of be in a state where we're like, accepting and open to like other pieces of information that may not be congruent with this goal, but it also might change it for the better or change us, and therefore we change in our goal.
It reminds me, where is it? There's a really cool thing where he's like, there's a profound idea in the ancient Vedic texts. So this is old Hinduism. Mm-hmm. The world is perceived as maya, appearance or illusion. This means that in part you are blinded by your own desires. And it is true in a sense. Your eyes are tools, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, cool. The point is that what Tristan's trying to say is, when you focus on a specific goal too much, you are literally blind to things which are irrelevant to the goal. So you could, what is a common thing that happens in a movie? Somebody is blind. They are driven by career. And they lose their family because they are literally blind to information, which would detract from it. So they're so focused on their career.
Or like focusing on a specific girl that you really like, and she's not the one for you, and then you miss the fact that your best friend is really into you. Do you get what I mean?
And it reminds me of like...
I've got something to say.
Yeah, it reminds me of In-Betweeners as well, because he was literally like Simon Bell.
Yeah, literally.
And he was like completely blind, and it's... I mean, he was a fucking extreme example, but it just goes to show how blind we are to specific things. If if you don't open your eyes a bit more.
Yeah.
And this is one of his realizations in the thing in the course. It was like attention, like just he was like pay attention. That's the one thing we can do.
Because we get
pay attention to things.
We get too ingrained in one way of living and thinking that it's the only way of living. It's like you hear about this all the time where people will work themselves to death because they think, for instance, money is the only way, the only goal that they have, and so they will do everything to get that, and they deflect anything of value, because what is value at the end of the day? It's like, it's subjective, but it's also it's it's not just money at the end of the day. Like, that's just one example, but
well, there's other values, isn't there? Like,
yeah,
I always find that's interesting because most of the values tend to always be around specific like traits or accomplishment. Because in my head, it always links back to this Darwinian like sex thing. Like, whether you're male or female, you want to be out competing the others in the Darwinian sexual selection battle. And like, if you look at most of the stuff, like the money is a way of showing resources. Like intelligence is a way of showing you have superior, like your genes to outthink other people. There's like that, and these are all the things that we're always trying to like aim towards. So we actually do aim very subjectively, but all towards common themes in my head. Regardless.
Yeah.
You can map all of it onto specific Darwinian themes. Like, I mean, beauty is a pretty obvious one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And fitness is a pretty obviously linked to beauty, but also is linked to competence and ability to stick and discipline. This like is if you've got a fit body, it means you're disciplined. You don't eat junk food. You're disciplined going to the gym. You dedicate.
Traits.
You can achieve a goal, which is actually quite a nice. Like, if you can achieve a goal, you can achieve anything in my head. If you can stick to something and you can achieve anything basically. That's how people achieve great things. They set a goal and they fucking get after it, and they don't accept anything else but that.
Yeah.
And that's why the whole point of having 10x ambitions and going really fucking high is the best way to achieve anything, because the majority of people set like, oh, I want to go on a diet this year and lose with kg. That's a fucking pussy shit goal. Like, I'm going to get ripped, take shits the size of the Titanic on the way.
I think what's interesting though is in terms of what we were talking about yesterday, Jesus Christ, is this ability to make goals that are relative to where you are at this point in time. If I suddenly said I'm going to, become put on 100 kg of muscle this year.
Of course, it's not small, but it's got to be.
Yeah, it's got to be relative. That's what it is.
I think this is why you have that like the meta sort of like you have the higher one, but then you have the small incremental things that get to the higher one.
Yeah.
It's like in that book,
a goal broken down to goals.
It's like what's it called? Getting things done. It's like any goal is technically a project, and any project has multiple steps to finish the goal. So therefore, you break it down into smaller things. Like start small, 20 push-ups a day. Yeah. In fact, like you can start small at 5. Yeah. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Up, and then all of a sudden you're doing 100. Actually, that's probably a better point. Actually, start small, but have big ambitions.
Yes, exactly.
Way of explaining it.
We talked about this before in terms of like, obviously you have to focus on the process, and you have to enjoy the process, because if you don't enjoy the process, you're not going to get to your goal. But when focusing on your process, make sure you can see the big goal just above. Like, look up now and then to be like, why am I actually doing this? What's the big reason? And it's still there. And like, oh fuck, actually I have come quite a long way to where I want to go. Yeah. It's about just reminding yourself. What I find really interesting is like, certain things I think require goals, and then certain things almost don't. Like, we talked about this in terms of like, or I've talked about this in terms of like relationships. Going into a relationship, it's like, I think it's better not to have a goal. If you go into it and be like, oh, I want to have a girlfriend, I want this and that and that and that, you might be deflecting so many good things that might be coming from your partner or whatever, that may be suggesting, something else or better for you or whatever. Yeah. But if you go in with a plan, sometimes
I think the relationships that end up lasting are ones where you kind of fall into a relationship,
Exactly, I think so as well.
You don't start. I mean, obviously, you start off with the intention of romantic interest, but usually, I would say in general, it's probably specifically sexual in nature. Yeah. The majority starts sexually, like the attraction comes there. You sort of explore, you see what you both like, and then all of a sudden, you could be in a relationship. But it doesn't start off like, I want her as my girlfriend. Yeah. Because the reason you want her as your girlfriend is because you want to have sexual relations, pretty much in my head. Like that, it's like that's where he's going with it. Yeah. So it kind of leads that way anyway. But you don't need to have, like you said, the label on it to enjoy somebody's company. And some people, I can see it. It doesn't, you don't, because you have expectations of what that should be.
Yeah, exactly. I think what last point for me on this is that I think if you have a personalized goal of something that you like and you really enjoy and you're pursuing that, being completely open to things is the best. Like if I wanted to learn to play the guitar and then I start playing the guitar and then I come across the piano and I love the piano, it's like when I start to change my process, I change the goal as well.
Okay.
If you get what I mean. So as in like what was defined when I made this plan of like I want to be a guitarist, okay, was made now. But then later on down the line, time has changed, experiences occurred, and then I've come across the piano, and then I'm like, actually, I like piano more, and I integrate that in, and then it changes my personalized goal. Do you get what I mean? It's like, you've got to be open to experiences to be able to change. Like, don't be so rigid on your goal. Allow it to
I think
adapt.
the best way, I'm gonna get back to ordering chaos. He always says like, put a firm foot in order, so a firm foot in what you know, and then 1 foot in chaos is like a metaphorically like 1 foot in what you already know and 1 foot in unexplored stuff. So, and in my head, it actually should be related. So, like, if you're into sport, try another sport, which is similar.
Yeah.
And like do that sort of thing. Racket sports, you like tennis, go into squash, that type of thing. Mate, what's the next chapter? Can you remember? I got children here, so I'm talking as the one where it's like, don't make your children do anything that dislikes you, right? Or is it a different one?
Yes, I think that is it.
I mean, to be honest, this is a pretty.
Yeah.
I don't even know to begin with. This is a pretty deep one because it's more like he basically debunks quite a lot of ideas of like how kids are divine and people like see the kids as like noble savages. Like the society molds kids into like we have like a societal cancer which molds kids into these horrible things. When in reality, he kind of argues for like back to this thing we were talking about earlier. The center of your brain comes pre-programmed with emotions such as aggression, and he says 2-year-olds from his experience as well are literally the most aggressive types of humans. Is in the sense that their aggression hasn't been contained. They will kick, they will punch, they will bite, they do all sorts of things. And his point is this idea that we are born of like noble nature and that society is a cancer and causes us to wither is just dumb. Like, because it just makes no sense. But anyway, I'm not going to go deep into it. So this whole idea is, if you don't teach your kids correctly, or if you let them get away with things and don't give them strict orders, they don't turn to monsters. They will make you resent them in certain ways. So, for example, if you don't discipline them well enough, they will be showing this aggression, they'll be showing this frustration in public, right, making you look like a bad parent. I think it was his main point. And another point he has is like kids are constantly exploring for like rules and ways to understand how to behave, right? If you don't give them strict rules and then stand by those rules. So, for example, in one situation he's allowed to do something, in another he's not. I mean, obviously that you can probably learn the context difference between the two. But if he gets confused and like, for example, he does it here and then he does it here and it's the same context, he's going to get confused. So you need strict rules and strict ways of like making sure, for example, in public, that if you tell them not to do something, that they don't do it. Because his argument is, we all think of ourselves as well as like great people. You're going to always love your kids, and he says he has the more realistic vision of like, if your kids piss you off, you're going to be resentful towards them. So the example you give is, if you're in a restaurant, your kids were kicking up a fucking huge fuss, throwing food around potentially at the age of like 4, something which is like deemed socially unacceptable. As a parent, you're then going to be like, if you didn't punish them, you're going to be pissed off. You're going to go home. You're going to be a bit like, oh, fucking kids, right? And they're going to come up to you looking for attention. They're going to have done something now in your family, like looking for like your gratification, like, oh, that's a great job, and you're just going to like, you're going to give them the cold hand because they pissed you off. And he's like, this is what develops kids that turn to be quite bad, because you've built resentment for their bad behaviour, and then when they wanted your attention, you've like given them the cold hand, and therefore you create this like tension between parents, and that's where you end up with really troubled people. That was his point. And I would say I would trust his judgment as a clinical psychologist, having dealt with all types of people like this, that he knows kind of, and he's been reading the Piaget child development, how this happens, or like why this happens. And it is to do with this level of like being strict and being clear on like rules with kids, and not like his argument is, you need to socialise your kids, because if they aren't socialised properly and learn how to like behave properly,
then they can't navigate the world properly.
They can't navigate the world, and they will be ostracised by other people. So if they don't learn how to play properly with kids, the kids will ostracise them. They don't learn how to play properly, or like, for example, they misbehave, other parents won't want them over at their houses. What happens to a kid who's like being rejected by the world? I mean, I didn't need to tell you the answer.
No, it's exactly right. It's about getting in early. Okay, when something does start to either piss you off, or you know that it's not socially acceptable, you have to give them a strict order. You have to
Yeah.
You have to hit the nail with the head. Oh fuck! I can't even speak anymore. But yeah, no, exactly. It's because if you don't, they don't know that they're doing anything wrong.
I think the idea of like little angel is the thing that's the most ironic of it all. If your kid's the little angel in your eyes, he's the fucking devil, because you train him to be the king of the universe, like Narcissus, the person who's your mum like, oh, you could do no wrong. My kid can't bully anybody, and he's there in the fucking playground smacking the shit out of girls or whatever. But it's like, children are damaged when those charged with their care are afraid of any conflict or upset, and they no longer dare to correct them. And we're getting this a lot, I think, at the moment. People are like, punishment for kids, oh my god, no, my kid's an angel. It's like, no, kids are not angels. And also, I think kids are not angels.
What's interesting is there's been like studies on like on like training dogs, and the way to train a dog is you give them a reward after they do something good straight, like they use a clicker, because the clicker associates the sound is associated with what they just did, and then they get a reward. So the dog knows they're getting a reward for the thing they just did. If you don't tell someone off, or you don't give them a strict order when the thing occurs, then later on, it's like whack-a-mole. It's like, you push it down, it will pop up somewhere else later on. And if you suddenly give them the cold hand later on, then they can't see the association. They didn't realize that what they did earlier on was bad, because now you're punishing them now. It's like you have to punish them straight away so that they can understand the link and be like, okay, that was wrong. I can see that, people are pissed off. I'm not going to do it again.
I like this idea as well as a reframing. So it's like, it is an act of responsibility to discipline a child. It is not anger at their misbehaviour. It is not revenge. It is instead a careful combination of mercy and long-term judgment. Yeah. Because it's being merciful. Because if you don't discipline them, they're going to be tyrants, and they're not going to be well liked. Correction also helps the child learning that hitting others is a suboptimal social strategy, funny enough. Yeah. Without that correction, no child is ever going to undergo the effortful process of organising and regulating their impulses, because that's what you're doing. Yeah. Back to this, like, you've got this core brain. When you grow, your brain isn't at full capacity or full growth. You've got these core fucking emotions that are going off, like we said in the amygdala. It's hippocampus, I think, isn't it? Or something like that. So you've got this like level of like aggression because of the hierarchy need. You've got the aggression and everything, right? And if you don't have these rules like constricting, they're just going to grow out, and they're going to be aggressive in all situations. You get me? The whole point of telling them not to do stuff and like is to help them regulate. The impulses that they have. The impulse for stealing as well. Like kids grab toys from people and take it for themselves.
To constrict their emotions to the social environment, pretty much.
I think what's interesting, if I liken it to that book with like what I was just telling you about, like Dominion, which is like the growth of like morality, like so obviously we've got a very Christian ethos, like don't take, don't steal, whatever, blah blah blah. This idea that in the past, like people don't give a fuck. Like in some countries, people still don't give a fuck about stealing. If they don't believe, like if they think you're evil, they're just going to take shit off you anyway. If they don't think you're worthy, like it's really important to get these social impulses reined in. Yeah, really important. Yeah, in my head, and
especially early, like to do with like Piaget's child development, things like that. It's like a child's early development is so important, especially before like the age of 5. It's like because some of these things go like they just get molded and you can't change them afterwards. It's like, well, you can a bit, but like
I think his argument was there's a critical development period, and once you get past the age of 4, if you haven't controlled the aggression, they will be aggressive for the rest of their life.
Exactly.
And we all know where that ends up. Yeah. Like antisocial behaviours, etc. And then they wonder why they don't fit into society. That's the kind of level you get to, which is quite interesting. But it's very easy for us to sit here, That's why I always want to have this. I always want to have that secondary like sort of thing. But I with stuff like him, it just to me, especially looking at the evolutionary psychology stuff, it just makes sense that that's what the procedure of like parenting is. Just like you are moulding your child, and people are moulding and manipulating. Let them roam free. Yeah, good luck with that. Let them roam free and see what happens.
It is really interesting. I think like when you they're like babies especially will use like crying as like a method of getting what they want, but until they're taught that it's not a good strategy. And there's different I think he even says in the book that there's different types of crying.
It's like aggression crying.
Yeah, exactly.
Legit babies cry with aggression.
And it's all about teaching them. It basically doing this is basically teaching them which tools are appropriate for getting what you want in life and navigating life. It's like you can't go around crying. You can't go around beating people up. Because you're not going to get your stuff.
People who have high agreeableness must be basically taught not to use aggression ever, and it's like shameful to use aggression. Yeah. So it's interesting because there's the argument for the genetic cause of like, nature, nurture, etc. Like genetically, some people are more prone to aggression, but then I do think obviously with these like social regulations to mold the impulses, that you can actually shift somebody's personality if you basically make it so immoral. And I think that just goes straight to the junk shadow. But like the problem is when you suppress that aggression so much, then they're shocked when they have the aggression. If you get me, but
how does it? I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, like with neuroplasticity. How does that not change your, like, if you had, let's say, a genetic predisposition to being more angry, then how does neuroplasticity, like, let's say you didn't act, like, you were socially, controlled to not be angry, would you be less angry later on? Like, I don't know.
My understanding of neuroplasticity from reading the blank slate is, like, obviously it exists, don't get me wrong, but it's also it's finite in the sense that, like, the way I'm trying to think about it at the moment is like you have that stem. I don't think that stem changes. I just think the way it interacts changes, and that is the neuroplasticity. Right, so this is back to the idea of repression from like Jung and the shadow. I do think there's this idea of like, right, so the brain works through like inhibitory sort of like you either inhibit or you inhibit, or what's the opposite of inhibit? Prohibit, I guess it is. And then so the idea of like learning social regulation of the impulses, which are aggression, and they're so inhibited, and that is what your shadow is. And that is basically this idea that like you are capable of doing horrific things. This idea that you've repressed all these things that you think are wrong. And then certain circumstances they can be fired. And if they're fired, that's when you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm that person. And that's what I think the PTSD comes from. It makes sense. Like if you think about it, if you're regulating your emotions and your impulses, you're basically telling your brain, don't use this circuit. Do not use this circuit at all costs. And that's like a personality. And then it's like, okay, well, now you're going to need to use the circuit. Well, because you're in a state of fear, your whole brain's like lighting up, and it's like, fuck, we need to use this now.
But I wonder if then that's like a wrong conditioning in terms of like, you don't want to teach someone not to be angry because there are circumstances where you need to be angry. I think it's teaching them when to be angry.
I think that's the whole point. It's like the right situations. Like if somebody's being aggressive towards you, if you like, the whole point is you get taken advantage of. So psychopaths. If you're really, really fucking timid and agreeable, the aggression they're going to control it. You need to be like aggressive, but the same, because the thing is, a lot of these people who do that are actually false aggressive as well. They do it because they've picked a weak person. They've gone after him because he's weak, and that's it. It's almost like a protection mechanism against those types of people.
Which I think when you when you're aware of your shadow, and when you include it within all of you, then you can tackle the problem. It's like you can't tackle a problem until you accept that there's a problem, and then you can find a solution. It's like the same thing. It's like, pretending like you don't have a shadow and it keeps manifesting in behaviour all the time. It's not until you include that in all of you
that was the point, wasn't it? You can have
exactly.
a true self until you integrate that part of you that you're holding back.
That's the word I was looking for.
I think that's it, mate, because I think that's the first 6, or was it the first 5?
I think that's the first 5.
Oh shit, maybe you've gone through late.
Let me have a look. Chapter 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
1 second.
Should we leave it with that?
Yeah, I reckon, mate.
I think that was good. Alright. Peace out. Well, hopefully that piqued your curiosity, guys. After all, that's why we're here. If you'd like to know more about this book, head on over to our website, wisewords.blog. And if you have a particular book in mind you think we should review, send us a DM to our Instagram at wisewordsblog. Until next time, guys, have a good one.